Welcome back to Left Anchor. I'm Alexi the Greek.
And I'm Ryan Cooper. So today we've got a special guest, serving member of the Nashville City Council, Sean Parker from the 5th District. And he is currently in the process of running for re-election.
That's right.
And so
August 3rd, is it that he's up?
It's
right?
in August. I'm not sure
Sometime in
which
August.
day.
August.
But that's coming up thanks to a court case they won. As you'll hear in the interview, the Republican state legislature is attempting to scramble the entire rules of the election just a couple of months before it would have happened by cutting the number of city council members in half from 40 to 20, I believe. But luckily, that did not work. It was ruled out of order by the courts. And so they're going ahead. But yeah, we've got Sean on to just talk about all the drama that's been going down in Tennessee. You know, the battles between...
So much drama.
Yeah. A battle between the state legislature and Nashville that's been going on for years and years
and
now.
other subdivisions, you know, it's the state versus local contest, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the expulsion of the 3 Democratic legislators who were
the Tennessee 3. I like that moniker.
Yeah.
Tennessee 3. It's pretty good.
They were expelled from their seats for basically speaking out of turn. And
for caring about kids getting massacred. And that was a big no-no because they didn't follow procedure and didn't allow, in session to proceed without addressing the concern for kids getting massacred. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, you've all heard about that, or most of you might have, but we dig into that and many other related things. But there's really important context in history, I think, that foregrounds that conversation.
Yep. But yeah, but before we get to it, I think we just got to mention, as usual, that this podcast is sponsored by the American Prospect magazine. And if you subscribe at the $10 a month tier on Patreon, you'll get a free digital subscription to the website, as well as a discounted print subscription if you want it. Plus bonus episodes. If you subscribe at $5 a month, you'll get bonus episodes, which is every other one. Or you can just enjoy this one, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever. And
that does help us. We do appreciate it. And it also warms our heart when you write nice things.
Indeed.
Plus, it's still true. It's still true that the TERFs and the transphobes tried to mess up our ratings. So you are harming transphobes if you give us good reviews.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, say what you want about crimes against Robert's Rules of Order. Say crimes against the Left Anchor star rating on Apple Podcasts is far worse. Review bombing us should get you expelled from polite society. Anyway, let's get to our interview with Sean Parker right now. Sean, welcome to the program. There's so much to ask, there's been so much crazy drama in Tennessee over the last couple of weeks. I want to get into the specifics a bit later, I think. But can you set us up with some background on the sort of general political conditions in Tennessee and in Nashville? How the state has traditionally related to its most important city. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah.
And how has it changed over the last, say 10, 15 years?
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you guys for having me on today. Really excited to be here. Been a longtime listener of the pod. So appreciate the opportunity. So, Nashville, like a lot of other cities in red states, is kind of more liberal, trending more in the progressive direction than the state at large, as time goes on. And Tennessee as a whole was fairly balanced. We voted with the presidential winner, typically in recent decades. Al Gore did lose Tennessee in 2000. But So after Barack Obama was elected, though, you really saw a kind of a electoral backlash. You saw in those 2010 midterms where there were just, state legislative losses all over the country, just massive ones piling up. Tennessee fell victim to that. And we've sort of been in a solidifying and strengthening GOP trifecta supermajority environment since 2010 kind of brought that in. And, generally in recent years, there have been these like hot point issues. Like if it's, Nashville tries to do something on immigration or Nashville tries to do something on affordable housing, there'll be a big hubbub and the state will preempt us and, they'll pass a law to say, oh, you can't do that. And then we all say, darn, we really wanted to do something good, but the mean old state won't let us. But generally there was an interest from kind of the business community and the liberals in Nashville and the conservatives that ran the state to say, well, let's make sure the trains run on time. Let's make sure business continues as usual, still bringing companies here to relocate, still keeping the tourism dollars flowing. And I think that what has changed in this moment is it seems like that separate piece or whatever you want to call it is not guiding the relationship the way it used to. The mutual respect or the shared interest just doesn't seem to be there that was there, 4 years ago. And I think that what has really ratcheted that up is the sort of in 2020, we had the racial justice demonstrations, we had COVID restrictions, and we had the presidential loss of Donald Trump's reelection campaign. And I think that those three things just sort of whatever happy balance there was just really set the GOP MAGA crowd on a kind of a revanchist course.
Revanchist MAGA people? Unheard of. But what's especially interesting that we'll dig into even more, but if you could just spell out for people who might not know that much about constitutional power and state versus local, because you're talking about a partisan division, but also a state versus local division. And it's a very different thing, the state versus the city, the state versus local government, than it is, say, federal versus state, right? There's a much more bigger asymmetry of power, shall we say. So maybe for those that don't understand like constitutional law, could you explain that for people?
Yeah, and I'm happy to, just with the caveat that I am not a lawyer. And, we've actually been really digging into these topics because of a lawsuit that we had a victory in just yesterday against the state. But, there's sort of two competing theories of how states, and we call them political subdivisions. So that's your counties, your cities, and your metropolitan governments, which are combined counties and cities. That's what Nashville is. Nashville was actually the first metropolitan government in the country. So it's a combined county and city. But there are folks, especially in the GOP supermajority trifecta government, who say, well, these political subdivisions, they are creatures of the state, and then thus we can basically do anything we want to them. If we want to change something, we'll change it. And if they don't like it, tough. We've had this fight in Tennessee before. I think it really flared up in the 50s and again in the 70s. And that resulted in what's called the Home Rule Amendments to the state constitution. And so the Home Rule Amendments are basically to say, you can't pass a law that just targets Nashville. You can't pass a law that just targets Memphis. And what has happened there is you've started to see more and more laws that will say like, okay, well, this law, it does apply statewide, but it only affects metropolitan governments with over 500,000 people in them. And it's obviously that's violating the spirit of home rule. But we are seeing more and more stuff like that. Like, for example, with the lawsuit I mentioned, where they were trying to restructure the metro government. We have a kind of a unique government. We have 40 council members for a city of about 740,000 people. So it's almost kind of like a New Hampshire, Vermont vibe, where there's every neighborhood gets representation on the body. And, that was not something that we randomly came up with. There was an 8-year process that led to the consolidation of the metro government. There was lots of debate. There was lots of compromise that put us at this structure, and successfully got the charter approved by the voters. And so what the state did is they said, well, we're going to target metropolitan governments with this law, force them to restructure the government, but only if they have more than 20 council members. And guess how many guess how many metros in Tennessee have more than 20 council members? It's one. Yes, one. It's us. So, we can get more into that lawsuit if y'all want at some point, or I can talk about it now. But, there's basically we have elections in August, right? And so they passed this law, I don't know, 6 weeks ago or something. I mean, people were already picking up nominating petitions to run for office. People were already raising money. Some people had raised tens of thousands of dollars. And, they're completely changing the structure of the government. So these people, I picked up a nominating petition that says District 5. That was going to change if we didn't win this lawsuit for an election in August. People have already printed up signs. People have already, anyway, what's
the status with the win yesterday? That's great. Congratulations, by the way. So what did that change? What's the state of play now?
So, essentially, another example of the state. So we have won some fights with the state over the years. We won one a few years back, and it caused them to get mad, and they changed the way that the court system worked in Tennessee. So typically, before, if we challenged a state law on constitutional grounds, we would have filed a lawsuit in our Davidson County Chancery Court. It would have been heard first by a chancellor elected by the people of Davidson County, and then it would have gone through the regular appeals process if either party decided to appeal. State didn't like that because they kept losing, so they established a new constitutional court. So now when we challenge the constitutionality of a law, we file it in Chancery Court, and then we get one chancellor from Nashville, and then one chancellor from each Grand Division. So East Tennessee and West Tennessee. We're in Middle Tennessee. Tennessee, as y'all probably know, it's a long hot dog shaped state. So we talk about the 3 Grand Divisions. But so our cases get heard by 3 judges, only one of whom lives in Nashville. In this case, the 2 other judges on our challenge to the forced restructuring of metro government, the 2 other judges were, pretty openly Republican associated folks. So they heard this case and they said, there's some interesting, I'm summarizing here. They said, there's some interesting constitutional questions here. We might have home rule violations. We might have, other constitutional issues, but you certainly cannot inject chaos into this local electoral cycle by scrambling all the districts, by, doubling the size of every district, and by, changing the number of at-large folks. You cannot do that this late in the game. And so just, I think it was yesterday, the courts issued an injunction to halt the law from being implemented, this summer in these elections, and then to say, okay, and then you can adjudicate all these other constitutional issues and all that stuff. So it's a big win. I mean, it feels funny to say they're going to allow us the privilege of having our city council elections as scheduled, but we won. I mean, this was of the sort of anti-Nashville slate of legislation that has come through this year. This was the one that Republican leadership said, not negotiable. We're not talking on that one. They're like, we'll listen on the other ones, but we are cutting the council down. We are restructuring your government, whether you like it or not. And, frankly, as someone who's kind of been politically involved in Tennessee for years, it was a much needed win to let Nashville kind of be Nashville in spite of all the headwinds that the state is putting against us.
It's a win for democracy. Absolutely. Gotta take the wins when we can, right?
Well, there's a way to modify our charter and restructure our government, and you got to take it before the voters. They get a say in it. You can't just force it on them.
The Republicans are not so much in favor of that, of having voters
noticed.
decide things. I don't know. They're more and more. They're saying that out loud. I don't know.
What was the one last question on this thing? Like, what was the point of this? Like, was it just pure vindictive spite? Just like, hey, we're cutting your council in half because screw you, or was there some sort of a strategy to like get rid of the?
I thought I always like think through all these different scenarios, and I kind of thought for a little while that it was part of a really like well thought out, effort between like, right-leaning business interests and the Republican Party, and they had this big plan to take over the city council, and at this point, I think it was just kind of a fuck you. I mean,
pure id. It's pure id.
It's just, we want to remind y'all, again, these folks are operating from the mistaken orientation that they're political servants. Subdivisions are creatures of the state.
That's right. Yeah.
And the opposing view is that we are creatures of the state constitution.
That's right.
We are not creatures of the state legislature. We do not exist at Speaker Sexton's grace. We exist because the Constitution of the state of Tennessee gives us the ability to exist.
And it is true. So broadly speaking, state and local government relationships are very much dictated by the state constitution. So like, if the people of the state in ratifying the state constitution said the state can fuck over local government, that would be the case. That like the federal constitution gives states the ability to create constitutions that do that. But it's nice to know that your state constitution can be read in a way that does not say that that's what is supposed to happen in Tennessee. So that's nice.
Yeah. And again, I mean, going back to the 50s and the 70s, we put amendments in the Constitution as a result of the state being too heavy-handed with cities. This is not the first time this has happened, and it won't be the last.
Yeah. But yeah, can we move on to the 2024 RNC? Can you give us the drama on this? Like why the proposal was made, why it didn't make it through the Nashville government, and what Republicans did in response? Yeah.
So I guess this was the last summer. And this is, some folks talk about this as though it was kind of the opening shot of the, state versus Nashville war. And it's not, but it was certainly a high profile incident. So some business leaders and Republican leaders in the state put together a committee to try and bring the RNC to Tennessee, to Nashville specifically, the Republican National Convention. I won't say they really didn't make any effort. I mean, like they didn't have a lobbyist registered for the first like several months of their effort. They didn't really talk to council members, and not just myself. I think there's some folks might look at me and say, well, we're not even going to bother talking with him. That's fair. But they weren't talking to other folks.
Just from the look of you, I would want to talk to you.
Well, I mean, I honestly was a little bit, being someone on the left politically, I don't like the idea of saying no to any political party having their convention. But I mean, in this case, it's like, the guy that runs your party, the head of your party, last time he lost an election, he basically told everybody to come riot in the city. I mean, there was more than just this ideological. Now there's plenty of ideological and just like political reason to turn this thing down. I mean, this was a few months after they gerrymandered away the 5th district of Tennessee, the congressional district, which was largely Nashville. It's funny, Nashville's population grew between the 2010 and 2020 census, basically just enough to be a perfect congressional district on its own. And then this is the census where they decide to blow it up into three pieces.
What's the population? What's the population roughly?
It's
now?
like 740, I think 722, 740, somewhere in that range. But very close to, one of our, a ninth of the state's population, which we have 9 Congress members. So the RNC, this proposal comes forward. There's no votes for it. I mean, there's like 3 or 4 people on the council who would vote for it. We're getting pummeled with emails in opposition. There's overtures made about they're going to, cut the council. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're going to take over the sports authority. But, we really don't have – nobody is like – Milwaukee is what was ultimately selected. And if you look at how that worked in Milwaukee, they had special committee meetings. They had experts come testify about how you could make the convention safe. Just frankly, they made a real effort to garner enough support from the Milwaukee City Council to get the thing approved. Whereas here in Tennessee, it was just more like, oh, how dare you all not be thrilled about having a big Republican parade party in your city after we just, have preempted you on all these laws in the last few years and just did away with your congressional representation. How can you not, how dare you not be thrilled about that?
Yeah.
So I think it ended up getting withdrawn. I mean, like one really good indicator of how poor their effort was is one of my colleagues, Robert Swope, was the sponsor of the legislation to approve the RNC. Swope is a hyper partisan. He worked on the Donald Trump campaigns. I don't believe he's ever passed a countywide bill. And he's been in office for like 7 or 8 years. He's not the guy you give a bill you want to pass, and so they couldn't find a sponsor. I mean, you got one of 40 members, like that's just, they did not make a serious effort. So, but we did see as that vote went down, as we shot down the resolution to host the RNC, Republican, state Republican leadership was tweeting basically like one of them, I forgot what his title is, but he's tweeting, oh, this session's going to be fun, in response to us turning down the RNC. So it did sort of, it gave them a kind of public permission to go after Nashville in all these different ways. But, it was not the opening shot. But it was the one that gave them permission to kind of launch this legislative onslaught against us.
Can you tell us about another one? This stripping the funding from this music center. My understanding of this is like Nashville set up this thing with like a special like tax on itself, basically like on Nashville residents to fund like a little public, concert doohickey like people have done since time immemorial. And the state's trying to like throw a wrench in the entire process and like invalidate like a bunch of the tax code potentially. What's the story there?
Yeah. So the Music City Center, is a convention center that was constructed. It was kind of our answer to the Great Recession. And it was big picture. It was the biggest public project in, Nashville's history. It still is today. Unless we approve this NFL stadium, which we might talk about at some point. So it was like $600 million in 2010 money, I think, a ton of money, but it was financed largely by, setting up a special tax district, to capture, sales taxes as well as some countywide hotel taxes. So theoretically it's largely paid for by tourism and the visiting folks. In reality, it's very much paid for by locals as well. But, this thing, when we set up these big public projects, the financing is, at least in Nashville's case, it's usually pretty conservative. So we usually estimate, On the lower end, Nashville's had this like tremendous success with tourism. We've become the bachelorette destination. We have huge events. And so that those revenues that have come in have actually been like much higher than what is needed to pay for the Music City Center. It's a good problem to have. We've worked with, it's very much a partnership. We've worked with them to use some of that funding to help cover, and right now a little bit of that funding goes to affordable housing. It's not huge stuff that we're getting back out of it, but the two things that the state Republicans are trying to do is there's an authority, the Convention Center Authority. These are Davidson County residents. They're appointed by the mayor and approved by the Metro Council. They want to change it to where those are appointed by the governor and the Speaker of the House and the state's Senate. What do they call him? The Speaker of the State Senate. Basically, Republican leadership wants to appoint all the seats on the board, and then also they want to make it so that we can't ask them for surplus funds to pay for things like affordable housing and whatnot. That I think it's really, so there's that. And then there's also, they're talking about just doing away with some of the special tax districts that do fund to pay off that debt and to support that project. That they've kind of backed off of, because once the comptroller, kind of the finance overlord for the state saw some of that, I mean, he was like, you can't do this. Like, these are like, there's contracts protect these revenue streams. And, it's one thing to get sued by Metro. It's another thing to get sued by the kind of folks who buy these municipal bonds and represent the folks who hold these municipal bonds. So I think they backed off of the defunding of it pretty quickly, but they still want control of it.
They want to take the money, you think? They're trying to get their fingers in the pot?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they're the frustrating thing about the disconnect there is that for those of us who live in Nashville and have seen its kind of rise to a global destination, some folks think it's that. I think we're headed that direction. But either way, more and more tourists coming in, Airbnb moving into the neighborhoods and gobbling up rental housing. And so the big tourism push that we've made over the last 13 years has really contributed to some of the housing affordability issues. When you take a third of the rental stock in a neighborhood and convert it to Airbnb, that's going to have a huge impact on affordability and availability of housing. And so when we're able to work with them and say, can you make a contribution from your, like pile of Scrooge McDuck money over there at the Music City Center to help some of these issues that we know the tremendously successful tourism economy is driving some of these issues. Can you make a contribution? And they've agreed to do that. And the state is saying, we don't want you working with them on that. They're saying, we want the Scrooge McDuck pile for, I don't know what they would steer it toward, but it ain't going to be housing.
No, it'd be like the next Jeffrey Epstein kind of situation. That they want to, do some naughty billionaire things. I don't know. So, but seriously though, what else, Sean, do you think we should know? Because I'm curious about a couple of things that are obvious and important for our audience. One is, what other context in state, local politics do we need to understand the racist, anti-democratic expulsion situation that's happened recently? And also I want to ask about socialism, right, in Tennessee. And I'm not outing you by saying you're a socialist, but you're only one of two socialists apparently, right? That's been elected in Tennessee currently, right? So maybe you could speak to those two things: the presence of socialists and DSA, and maybe any other background you think is important to understand the recent events.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a huge, there's a lot in that question. So the political context, the racist expulsion, I mean, there's a fundamental like anti-democratic strain. I mean, that probably goes without saying, for these like far right MAGA folks that are running the state right now. I mean, the thing that has gotten maybe the least attention in this assault on Nashville is they're, undoing the, they're making it illegal for us to have community oversight boards for our local police departments. So, this was something that, one of the things that really got me involved in local politics in 2018 was, this push by people who were directly affected by police killings, organizing to establish an oversight board. They tried to do it through the legislative process at city council. That failed. And they said, well, we're going to go out, we're going to sweat, and we're going to collect signatures to put a charter amendment on the ballot. They did that. We did that. And it went to the ballot, and the people overwhelmingly voted in favor of it. We had a really tragic police killing in the city of Memphis earlier in the year. I believe it was in January. Tyree Nichols, I'm not going to recount the details of it here, but I mean, if you listen to that story, you can hear his family tell the story on various videos and whatnot. I mean, just brutal, heart-wrenching, just brutality. And it's in that context that this General Assembly came together in February, weeks after, and filed this bill to abolish community oversight. I mean, there is no sensitivity. There is no, if there's awareness, it is purely hostile of the dynamics. And I think that going back to the expulsions, I mean, the guy from Sevierville, Andrew Farmer, I mean, you can just, he's the one that got up, and was talking to, I think it was Justin Jones, and just saying, well, I mean, I can't imitate him, but just being completely.
You can try if you want. If it doesn't work, we can cut it out. We want to try to imitate him. Try to imitate him.
No, I don't know what he said well enough, but just complete, just dressing this young lawmaker down. Just there's something that I learned. There's a way that people will talk down to you in meetings when they know you can't respond, and it felt like that. But obviously with this like hyper present racial overtones, I was going to say undertones, but these folks.
Maybe you can start and just, for those who aren't aware, the news has been, I mean, it's been in the news, but for those who maybe have been just totally missed it, maybe just say what's happened very recently.
Yeah. So, we had, a couple of young, legislators elected, one of them from Nashville, his name's Justin Jones, one of them from the Memphis area, Justin Pearson, and then kind of a longtime member of the, General Assembly, Gloria Johnson from Knoxville. So it's kind of perfect. I talked about our grand divisions. We've got the Tennessee 3. We've got one from East, one from West, and one from Middle Tennessee. So, it's a very Tennessee way to do things. But we had this tragedy in Nashville a couple weeks ago. Someone with an assault rifle went into their former elementary school and killed, 3 children and 3 faculty and staff. One of the responses that folks had was, okay, it's time to take a look at this gun stuff because, you can't touch guns in Tennessee. The gun lobby has made examples of Republican legislators who do anything on guns or are insufficiently supportive of this kind of batshit, assault rifles for all gun policy. So anyway, folks were up at the Capitol. They were saying, y'all file a bill. Let's have a debate, like something, anything. And, the response from leadership was, no, we're not talking about this. We're not listening. So Justin, and Gloria said, no, we're going to go up to the well, which is where the microphone is that you speak from. And this is during session. So we're going to go up to the well and we're going to demand that, we have this conversation, that something happened, that whatever. Like, we're not just going to pretend like 6 folks aren't, dead, riddled with bullets and like it didn't happen. And so their microphone got cut off, and then one of them pulled out a bullhorn, and they said, well, you can cut off our mics, but we're still going, I don't know exactly what was said. Basically, they broke the rules of procedure. They approached the well. They spoke on the microphone without Cameron Sexton saying they were allowed to. It's a big no-no. But the reaction,
murdering kids, no big deal. Breaking procedure in session with the microphone, big deal.
Yeah, sorry, we can't do anything about the mass killings that are happening with frequency. But folks speak out of order.
Let's get our priorities right, Sean.
Yeah. So, the reaction from Cameron Sexton and the Republican caucus was to file motions for expulsion for all three of those members. This is the most extreme punishment that you can take against a House member. I mean, we've seen it a couple of times in recent political history. And, both times it was folks had done things that would really end their political careers. Otherwise, corruption, bribery, criminal charges. There's alleged or admitted, there's someone who is widely believed to be a pedophile in the Republican caucus who is apparently on tape apologizing to one of his victims. And that's never been an issue. There's just all kinds of things that have happened over the years and didn't result in really any sort of disciplinary action. That man that I was referencing was actually made chair of the Education Committee. And the alleged activity took place with girls he was coaching at the time as an adult. And anyway, so there's plenty of ghouls, plenty of bad things happening, and there's never any discipline. And so these folks go out of order, break the rules, and we've got expulsion hearings. It's a high bar. You need 2/3 of members to support expulsion for it to happen. The GOP held pretty firm. I think they lost one member on Justin Jones' expulsion vote, so he was voted to be expelled. Justin Pearson, I think, had even more votes for expulsion. And then Gloria Johnson narrowly survived. It's actually interesting because they went Justin Jones, Gloria Johnson, and then Justin Pearson. Justin Pearson was the deciding vote to not expel Gloria. So if they had gone in a different order, all three of them would have been expelled.
Interesting.
Anyway, this just huge, just overreaction, and it's gotten more attention to the state of Tennessee than I've ever seen nationally. I mean, it's, I believe it's CNN, MSNBC. I don't have any of those channels, but, my parents love to send me pictures of me when they see me on the TV, and,
as they should.
I've got
absolutely.
And, friends are reaching out who are apolitical for the most part, folks that certainly don't think about, state and local and who Cameron Sexton is and who's the state, legislator. It's really kind of broken through this expulsions of the Tennessee Three. I mean, for Nashville's part, we had a special meeting yesterday, because the vacancies are filled by the county commission. In Metro's case, that's the Metro government. And so we, suspended the rules and just said, we're just going to put Justin right back in there. It was a great moment. There's all these people at the courthouse. We voted to put him back in there, and they just marched right up the street from our courthouse to the Capitol building. And he was sworn in and he was back on the floor that evening. So, we were able to get it together and get him back in there really quickly, which I'm proud of. But,
no, that's good. That's good background. So you were kind of, bringing people up to speed on the kind of anti-democratic nature and the racist nature of these expulsions, because people who might have heard of the news certainly don't necessarily know all the context that you were providing beforehand, and we're trying to understand it better in light of all that. So I think you're explaining that, and I was also curious about the kind of socialist kind of counter to the GOP and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing about the Democratic Party in Tennessee is that it doesn't really have much going on. There are these, gerrymandered super blue safe seats in the cities, And then there's like a couple of like purplish seats, bluish seats that, are competitive in a good year when you've got two, strong candidates on each side. But, for the most part, it's folks that are sitting in these seats and they're not, for the most part, there are some exceptions to this, but for the most part, people are not out trying to build the party, reach out into rural communities and whatnot. So, there's not I think that a lot of my, colleagues in DSA, other electeds, they're dealing with like a democratic machine in their state or in their city. Like we just kind of don't have that. So it almost leaves like a space open for folks on the left, like socialists like myself, to kind of occupy a space. There's actually, you'd have to ask Seema and Amelia out in Knoxville. There was, for a time, I thought that I might have been the first and only socialist ever elected in the state of Tennessee in 2019. But then I found that Seema Singh in Knoxville was apparently identifying as an open socialist in 2017 when she was elected, which is super cool. And then Amelia, she's like definitely like movement adjacent, but I don't know if she identifies as a socialist. But the thing is that we don't have, we are so deeply constrained by state law and other factors at the municipal level that, we can't pass Medicare for all. We can't even raise the minimum wage. We can't do this, that, and the other. So, I mean, for me, what it's been is sort of like engaging in this project of municipalism, of saying like, well, here is the vehicle that's available to us. And then, so what does it look like to live out, socialist values within these confines? And it's, I talk about this with like DSA folks all the time. Like they sent me a questionnaire in 2019 for national endorsement, which I did not get. My chapter endorsed me, but they sent me this questionnaire with like all this detailed like foreign policy stuff, and I was just like,
do they know what you do? Do they know what your job is?
Like I'm probably with y'all on all this stuff, but like I don't have time to go research it. I'm out here talking with folks about garbage collection and zoning.
So wait, what looks different then for a socialist to occupy your position? Versus just like a centrist Democrat versus a Republican, given the constraints of the red state and the power of the state against the municipal, right? So what actually does look different, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a willingness to, try to engage and empower my constituents and my neighbors democratically. I mean, we have these big forces of, tech capital and real estate capital that are really shaping cities, especially cities that are growing as fast as Nashville. And, it's like, I'm a pro-housing socialist. I want to see housing built as a general rule of thumb. But when you come in here and you say, okay, well, we want to build some housing here. Oh, it happens to be where 200 mostly black families live in some of the only affordable housing left in the district. Well, we're going to have to tap the brakes there, because there's other places you can build this stuff. And it's like, the places where, the displacement issues are huge in a city like Nashville. I mean, I think that this is like around the country, like any place that has like a walkable, urban core and like decent schools and like some kind of like infrastructure and cultural amenities is just getting like, people are just moving to it. And a ton of those neighborhoods throughout the U.S., especially in the South, the core of the cities were where the black folks lived. And a lot of them still do. And so, just having a willingness to, do everything possible to empower those folks to get better outcomes. I mean, usually there's still displacement, but sometimes like, the asks are different in different contexts. Sometimes it's, and so just to be clear, the reason why we have so much say over development is because we have zoning in Nashville. I think most cities have some kind of zoning. So if somebody wants to build 500 units on this 2-acre property, but right now the zoning only lets them build 100, then they have to come have meetings and they have to talk to the community and they have to get support. And, maybe there's people that are opposed to it. And so the state can veto ambitious, like if you want to do Medicare for all or something, that the state could veto ambitious things like that, but you and yours can veto things as well, given what you have control over, right? Yeah. And I mean, I think that I would love, again, if we could do 15, well, not 15 at this point, like $25 an hour minimum wage. If we could do all these things, I certainly would, and I would be pushing for it. But it's just, we don't have, that's just not the field we are operating within. And so, yes, we do have veto power.
Getting people involved is also an incredibly important thing. And I think it redounds on, not just the local, but the state and federal level in terms of electoral politics, but also just in terms of all kinds of things. If we just had on a friend of the podcast, Pete Davis, who was talking about civic associations and talking about how you can have strong institutions, but if you don't have strong civic associations, that's a huge problem.
So bringing, so it used 5-7 years ago, you watch a city council meeting, it's largely the same older folks who would come out and they would talk about projects. They would oppose apartments being built near them. And part of what I've tried to do this term is really get it's not just an age thing, but younger people tended to not be around, but trying to get young people more engaged, trying to get working class people more engaged. And I loved that episode on the America's crumbling civic infrastructure, because that's something that I go to the DSA meetings and I'm like, hey, everybody, have you been to your neighborhood association meeting? And, some neighborhood associations are, a bigger deal than others, but these are these spaces where there's really no generally established power. It's if you show up and you're willing to come to meetings,
right. You can do things.
Come to one neighborhood cleanup, and then all of a sudden you're second in command of the neighborhood association. That's
a point that Jamel Bowie, Ryan, remember when Jamel Bowie came on? That is kind of one of the top things he said. Get involved locally. You can have a lot of power and influence, right?
Well, and it's go ahead.
Oh yeah, he said you can go take over your local Democratic committee. They're usually completely moribund.
No, totally. And with the neighborhood associations, it's if somebody comes into your neighborhood and says, we want to build, 200 units of affordable housing, if you're not in those meetings, there's a decent chance that some very loud people are going to say, we don't want that. Maybe do 50 units and not affordable. You can, other people will veto stuff. And folks that have these values, that have democratic values, socialists, progressives, whatever, need to be in these spaces. And I tell folks that your neighborhood association, it's one meeting a month. It's an hour a month. And if you just keep showing up, maybe nothing's happening, but something will happen. And then you want to have those relationships with other folks in your neighborhood and leaders and everything, so that when something happens, you're a person that can walk in the room and people say, well, hey, what do you think about this? Where are you at on this?
Plus, you make friends, build relationships. Life is more meaningful.
That's great too. You look after each other's dogs, all kind of fun stuff. It's good to, look, if you're a socialist and you don't know your neighbors, what do you get off Twitter?
What's going on? Come on. Yeah, that's
put down the books and go talk to your neighbors.
Touch grass, talk to your neighbors. That's right. Sean, are you running for office again? Because we should get people to vote for you, and if we can illegally vote for you, we'll do it too. So,
well, if I can make a little plug, I actually am running for election. The election is August 3rd. Again, we won a court case that's going to allow us the privilege of having our elections. My website is pitiful right now. It just goes to an ActBlue link, but you can find it at seanfor5.com. That's SeanForFive.com. 5, 10, $50 goes a long way. These are small districts, and we got to get the word out to about, 6,000 people in our likely universe. So there's a lot of mail and it's a lot of door knocking. So any help that y'all can do would be much appreciated.
Let's do it, Left Anchor audience. Come on, let's give them the bump. We single-handedly got Nikhil Saval elected, didn't we, Ryan? That was us.
Nice.
So,
nice.
We'll do what we can. And, Sean actually said he was a fan of the podcast, but then he actually proved it by referencing an episode specifically that he must have listened to. So now you should help him twice as much as before.
Well, thank you guys. That's awesome.
Yeah. I do have a couple more questions though.
Yeah.
I was just, I quickly looked up while you were talking, what the Trump margin was in Tennessee. Of course, he won stonking huge victory with 60% of the vote, a little over 60%. But there's a whole bunch of other states that he did better in. He got like 68% in West Virginia, 69%, not nice, in Wyoming. He did more than 60 in, I think, Alabama and South Dakota, and 63, I think, in Kentucky. Kentucky has a Democratic governor, if I'm not mistaken. Do you think that this, on the one hand, the Tennessee 3, huge overreach in terms of like national attention and backlash to just like, grossly vindictive government. And then on the other hand, like possibly being able to peel off some like business conservative type of people, like people who just want, the subsidies to keep flowing and nobody to like kill the goose that lays the golden egg in terms of tourism, investment, and all that type of stuff is put at risk. It's like, you get too much of a political backlash going in, maybe Amazon or somebody might pull out logistics hubs or something like that. And like, do you see a potential like, to build a new statewide coalition that could like contest for power?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of something that, before I got so involved at the municipal level, and I mean, I've stayed involved, but that's a project that I've been a part of for years in Tennessee. And this is the first time that I've seen like just any reason to be hopeful about that project. And the point you make about, I think that part of what like the keeps the economy so strong in Nashville is that we can attract these tech companies. They want to come to Tennessee because we've got, the pro-business tax environment. We've got low regulatory environment. But their employees want to live in Nashville because we're welcoming. You can
good music. You have good music. Let's not neglect.
We
that.
have cultural amenities. We have decent schools. You don't get looked at weird if like you're in an interracial marriage. Like you can be yourself here generally in the city. But we have that pro-business environment. So I mean, if people no longer think of Nashville that way, that it is this welcoming place that all kind of different people can come be part of, that's going to be hugely negative. And this really, I mean, I don't know when we've gotten some positive attention at the national level in recent history. I mean, it's just every time we're on the news, it's, just, and it's not like they did anything to confine this spectacle. They gave each of these members like 2 hours to sit and talk, and basically be like cross-examined and go back and forth with all these ridiculous questions and prompts and insulting things that were being said by the lawmakers seeking to expel them. I mean, it was just really like you couldn't do it worse than the Republicans did here. And I mean, it remains to be seen what will come of it. I mean, I certainly hope some money. The biggest thing that Tennessee needs, we need a good candidate to run against Marsha Blackburn in 24. We need somebody to run for governor in 26. And those statewide races are really important for kind of activating people outside the cities. Really, we're low turnout across the board. Even if we just got the cities to turn out in a way that they're not right now, that margin, that statewide margin closes, that gap closes quickly. If people vote, we're a very, very low turnout state, lots of voter suppression, lots of voter disenfranchisement. We had, I forget specifically what passed, but I mean, there were, anti-voter registration laws passed as a result of the 2018 push to register all these folks. But what we need is, funding so that staff can stay and work and build here in Tennessee. I mean, this stuff it's not going to be built on the back of volunteers. Like, you need good people, I always look at like the Wisconsin Dems. I feel like they're like a little bit where they're a little bit ahead of where we were, like if where we are, if we successfully execute some kind of statewide thing. But, I know so many people, they might like work on some campaigns or something, but it's like you're talented, you're in politics in Tennessee. You're either going to get poached by the private sector or you're going to go to a state where you can work year round and make a real living, I see so many people leave politics. I see so many people leave the state because, there's just not year round money for people. There's some good orgs. There are, but we need more of them and we need funding for them and we need people to work and stay.
Well, it's a worthy mission, and let's make it happen. I think. What else can you do but try to make that happen, right?
Well, we used to say growing up, Tennessee, to stay or flee was the joke, and it's really bizarre, I'm here, my family's here, I'm not going anywhere, and it's really bizarre. Like these folks, like we have this massive influx of like transplants, like far right, like media figures and whatnot coming here. Daily Wire has relocated here. We've got Matt Walsh and Robbie Starbuck and all them. And I went to, they had a big anti-trans rally at the Capitol, like 6 weeks ago. And I think it was Robbie Starbuck was up there on stage. This is like a transplant from California. He's been
an like anti-trans transplant. I couldn't help it.
Yeah, that's. But
this the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy. They themselves are trans.
Well, he's up there on stage, and I'm back there with kind of with the trans folks that were there counter demonstrating, and his message. He looks over at us, and his message was, get the moving trucks ready because this is not the state for you. And it's like, what do you mean? I live here. Like you're visiting here for work. Like this is our state, man. Like this is where
carpetbagger. You damn carpetbagger.
Yeah, carpetbaggers. I mean, like he actually tried to run for a congressional seat in the newly created 5th district, and the Republican Party, the state Republican Party had like some kind of declaration that he's a carpetbagger and he shouldn't be allowed to run, and then he got kicked off the ballot. It was very funny.
Perfect.
but yeah, just the gall. I mean, the gall to say like, get your moving trucks ready. And it's like, man, can I borrow the one that's still in your driveway? Like,
what? This is an interesting sort of aspect of this, I think, that's maybe suggested by that trend of all the far right people moving to Nashville, which is supposedly in their fantasy imagination, like the heart of Mephistopheles, and, it's just like demonic flames pouring from every, gutter and light pole. It's like, it feels like a lot of this stuff against, the movements against Nashville, it's to like conservatism degenerating to a state where it's like they just want something to kick. They want like a sort of helpless like group of people who basically can't fight back and they just want to stomp on them. And like they come, I feel like, to Nashville because of the liberals that are there. Like if Robbie Starbuck got his wish and all the liberals packed up and went to wherever, Palo Alto, it would be a boring conservative place with nobody to oppress. Like
it wouldn't be conservative. Is that a motivation? Because you wouldn't have the outgroups that form the identity of it, right? That wouldn't.
Yeah. And I think that there's a disappointment. People look at Tennessee and they think, okay, this is some kind of like, far right paradise. And it's like, I mean, the only place that you're going to have that as like your cultural saturation is like places you don't want to be. Because I know these folks from California, I mean, they're not into farming. They don't know how to work with their hands. They're not going to tractor pulls. Like, they're not doing that stuff. They don't want to be out there. They want to be in Nashville. And then they show up in Nashville and it's like, well, who are all these people? Like I thought this was like some kind of like white, far right haven. But the thing is, like, the cities, I mean, the most reliable indicator, I think, of political leaning for a population is density. I mean, there's just something that is fundamentally not conservative
Yeah.
about
Well, to be fair, Matt Walsh is very dense, to be fair. So.
But well, I mean, these guys, they don't live in Nashville. They live in, like Walsh lives in Franklin, which is like one of the wealthiest zip codes in the country. You know, it's massive McMansions and yards and, you know, but they all want to come hang out here. I mean, hell, what's his name? Cameron Sexton, the Speaker of the House. He represents Crossville, which is about 2 hours from Nashville. And folks have been looking into him, and apparently he lives in Nashville. Apparently his kids go to a private school in Nashville. His wife lives in Nashville. Like, what, you know, he wants to, that's why he's so obsessed with Nashville, because it's his city now, apparently. So, but, you know, I think it's frustrating to, you know, buy into this, you know, if you're sold kind of a bill of goods that all of Tennessee is some kind of, you know, just conservative theme park, and then you get here and it's like, no, actually we're cool. We like other people, and that's why we live in a city. And I think it's disappointing to folks, and they want to change it. But I mean, the thing is, like, the notion that you're going to like scare off all the people you disagree with, like the percentage of people who choose where they live based on the political climate is, I would venture to say, it's single digit. I think it might be like,
that's a pretty privileged thing to do.
Yeah. It's like, you're just going to make a bunch of people miserable. That's all you're going to do. Like, you're not going to get rid of, like, there's not going to stop being gay people. There's not going to stop being Kurdish people. They're not going to stop being like all the different kinds of people you don't like just because you're being a bigger asshole. It's just going to be like it's just going to be a bunch of.
Who knew that strategy wouldn't work? If I'm a big enough asshole, the gays and the Kurds won't exist. I love that.
There's no. That's never worked, and like,
this is great. For
it to work, it would have to be such an ugly endeavor that is.
Let alone the gay Kurds, which is a very small minority.
That's right. Yes.
Well, this has been great, Sean. You've given us a window into the madness behind the GOP, and I'm glad you're down there fighting the fight. You shouldn't have to leave Tennessee, Sean. It's your home, your family's there, and there's plenty of good people there. The Matt Walshes and those people should either learn to live amongst diverse people and stop being hateful, or they should leave. We could ship them off somewhere. I don't know.
There's room for everyone, but I mean, you gotta let other folks be. I mean, that's kind of you want to be in Tennessee, let folks be. How about that? That's our new slogan.
I like that.
Yeah, I remember when I was
a bumper sticker.
A classic bumper sticker when I was in high school. It was like, America, love it or leave it. And if, you think about America as it actually exists, a giant cosmopolitan, basically empire, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multilingual, you gotta love America as it actually exists, I'd say. If you want to adhere to that bumper sticker, at least, you can't just say, oh, the white suburbs are real America, even though it's
that's
like
right. To love actual
population.
America. Yeah, to love actual America instead of the kind of white supremacist fantasy of what America is. That's all the difference in the world, isn't it?
And that America never was. I mean, that fantasy never. There is not a shining 1950s. It was just. I mean, maybe you got to feel like it existed because of segregation or because of some other like institutional forces that have been dissolved to varying degrees. But I mean, it never existed. It's a fantasy.
No.
It's just like these folks who move here and expect Nashville to be some, right-wing theme park. It just ain't.
No, yeah. The only glorious America is the one yet to come, and it's not coming from the right. It's coming from the left. So appreciate you, right. Sean. Re-elect Sean Parker, sir. I think that is, that's what we need in this country.
Thank you all. Yeah. I really appreciate it. It's an awesome experience to be here.
And thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you in the next episode.